This is the unluckiest man in the world. He was just taking a nap on the plane. When he landed, he found that his country had been bombed out of existence. Not only had his visa and currency become invalid, but even his flight home had been forcibly cancelled. However, unable to speak the language, he still had no idea what had happened. The airport manager had no choice but to crudely demonstrate it to him with potato chips.
The Big Apple represents the Liberty Rebels. No more Krakosia.
Victor was detained at the airport. He had absolute freedom, yet he was absolutely not free. He was free because no one at the airport could manage him. He was not free because he had no right to leave the airport or return home. The manager thought Victor would secretly sneak out of the airport, only to be taken away by security. But unexpectedly, Victor followed the manager's advice and chose to stay in the airport, waiting for his country to be rebuilt. He pieced together old chairs into a makeshift bed, then unplugged the power, intending to get through the night. But as soon as he lay down, he mistook the airplane's lights for the armed forces coming to capture him. Fortunately, it was just a false alarm, but the next day, he was completely targeted by the airport manager, as he was highly likely to cause the manager big trouble. If the airport remained problem-free before the higher-ups retired, the manager could smoothly take over. But just as he finished speaking, he spotted someone wandering around the airport in a bathrobe on the surveillance monitors. This was undeniably damaging to the airport's image. The manager was exasperated. He couldn't understand why Victor didn't just try to sneak away. In order to secure his promotion and raise, the manager decided he had to get rid of this hot potato. He stared intently at Victor through the glass, then ordered his staff to get tough with him. So while Victor was enjoying some free airport snacks, the manager approached him directly. Pretending to be helpful, he revealed a piece of information to Victor. He mentioned that during the guard shift change at noon, there would be a 5-minute gap. He subtly hinted that Victor could use that moment to slip away. Victor thought he had stumbled upon a golden opportunity, but in reality, it was just the manager's trap. Outside the airport, a complete net of surveillance and security had been laid to catch Victor. If he so much as stepped 1 foot outside, the manager had the authority to arrest him immediately as an illegal trespasser. Victor looked at America, so close yet so far. A flood of mixed emotions surged within him. He slowly walked toward the doors, but noticed something off. The surveillance camera seemed to be locked onto him, scanning his every move. To test his theory, Victor deliberately moved forward and backward, pretending to tie his shoe. Sure enough, the camera followed his every motion. When the manager was exposed, he sheepishly ordered his staff to move the camera away. But by then, Victor had already taken cover directly below the lens. When they couldn't locate him anywhere, the manager flew into a fit of rage. And just as he was swamped with chaos, Victor's big face suddenly appeared on the screen. For security monitors split at once, clearly capturing Victor's counterattack. The entire security room burst into laughter. Since his plan had been exposed, the manager could only cover his awkwardness with a helpless gesture. Seeing that trickery wouldn't work, the manager decided to take a more straightforward approach. He prepared a lunch for Victor, then told him there was still one way he could return home. All Victor had to do was claim he feared the chaos in his homeland, and with help from US law, the manager could apply for political asylum on Victor's behalf using exceptional measures. Victor, thrilled, agreed. But when the manager started the questioning, Victor didn't give the answer he was hoping for.
Do you, at this time, have any fear of returning to your own country?
No.
The manager thought perhaps he hadn't explained things clearly, so he stressed even more how terrible Victor's homeland had become. Armed soldiers filled the streets, and violence and looting were everywhere. Then he asked Victor again, but this time, Victor's answer was firm and unwavering.
His home. I am not afraid from my home.
The manager was left speechless. Their conflict deepened further with no resolution in sight. Until one day, the manager finally found a way to strike back at Victor. Since Victor had no income, he took up collecting luggage carts at the airport. Because for every cart returned, the machine refunded 25 cents of the deposit. But most airport travelers were in too much of a rush to care about that bit of spare change. For Victor, however, it was a life-saving opportunity. Eagerly, he returned 3 carts, and finally bought himself a hamburger to ease his hunger. After savoring that small success, Victor doubled down on collecting carts. After a day of hard work, a long line of carts quickly formed, and the coins inside the machine seemed endless. This time, he treated himself to a deluxe meal. Although he had solved his hunger problem, a much bigger challenge lay ahead of him. He couldn't understand English at all. At that moment, the TV once again aired live coverage of the war in his homeland, but Victor could only make out a few scattered words. So he used his spare change to buy some English learning books. At night, he began studying English day and night, but seeing him improving day by day, the manager could no longer sit back. So he quickly created a new position and hired someone else to replace Victor's cart job.
Thank you. I'll take it from here.
Just like that, Victor lost the only source of income he had worked so hard to find, so he decided to look for work in the various shops around the airport. But all he received in return was either cold rejection or mocking laughter. After all, no one wanted to hire someone with an unclear identity. Finally, he came across someone who told him to wait for a response, but he was asked to leave a phone number. Victor had no choice but to give the number of a nearby public phone. Afraid of missing any potential call, he held his bladder to the brink of bursting, refusing to leave the phone unattended. He waited like that all the way into the evening. The store manager couldn't take it anymore, and reluctantly called the number of that public phone Victor had claimed.
Hello?
Hi, Mr. Navorsky.
Yes, Cliff, I wait for your call the whole day.
Unfortunately, I gotta tell you that the position's been filled.
Oh.
Yeah, so could you please go sit someplace else?
It became obvious that Victor had been strung alone. He put down the phone and finally dashed toward the restroom. But in his rush, he forgot to check the sign overhead. After waiting the entire day in vain, he wandered into a construction site without knowing it. It was shoddy construction, one push and the wall gave way. Victor, being an architect, suddenly felt a spark of inspiration and started working on repairs just to pass the time. Though he hadn't practiced his profession in quite a while, his skills were still sharp and solid. By dawn, one wall had been renovated into a beautiful new surface. That very moment was seen by early shift workers walking in. Victor was startled. The foreman looked utterly confused. At that moment, Victor decided to sneak away quietly. But after seeing Victor's handiwork, the foreman immediately decided to hire him on the spot and offered him a wage of $19 an hour, though it came about entirely by accident. It finally gave Victor a job that could support him, but the airport manager grew a little jealous.
Unbelievable. Do you know that's more than I make?
With just 3 days left before a higher-up audit, the manager worried that Victor might do something bizarre again, so he called every agency he could think of: immigration, law enforcement, even prisons, trying to unload Victor onto any department that would take him. But no one wanted to accept such a hot potato, so he came up with a flimsy excuse and legally had Victor detained. Immediately afterward, he launched the most thorough airport inspection campaign. But then, an unexpected incident occurred. An Eastern European traveler suddenly caused a disturbance. Due to the language barrier, the helpless manager had no choice but to ask Victor to interpret, and that one move allowed Victor to glimpse a hope of finally returning home. Want to know what happens next? Follow me. The rest of the story is coming soon.